The governor has put out a budget to deal with about a $7 billion budget gap this year. And the cuts are egregious. They are some of the worst cuts. The cuts to education, for instance, are the worst cuts to schools that we've ever seen in a state budget. Education is being cut. Pre-K through 12 education is being cut $1.4 billion. The state cut, the governor actually put a cut in of $2.1 billion in the state budget, but with the federal stimulus money still, remember we had a 2-year plus package, 27 months actually of federal stimulus money, and a portion of that is going to fill in that gap, some of that gap for schools, and bringing us down to a cut of $1.4 billion. Still the biggest cut to pre-K through 12 education in our state's history. Healthcare is being cut $2.7 billion. Hospitals, nursing homes, home care services. Looking at some of my numbers here. Higher ed is taking a cut of $321 million, a huge hit to SUNY and CUNY. Libraries, again, are taking a $2.4 million cut in this budget. It is their fourth. As the chair of libraries, I'm feeling extremely proprietary about this item, as I am about all of them, really. The fourth cut libraries have taken in 2 years. Since that 2-year start, since the last budget, this budget, the DRP, the deficit reduction plan we did back in the fall, libraries are taking a 15.1% cut. And libraries were never generously funded to begin with. They're down to, out of our total state budget, they're down. They would be under this budget proposal. Mind you, we're just talking about a proposal at this point. This is not a final budget. Hopefully, I hope. They would take libraries down to $86.7 million. In 2007, when Spitzer came in, he added on to libraries. We actually took them up to $102 million, and now they'd be down to $86.7 million. Arts are taking a big cut, 18% cut this year, $6.5 million to NISCA grants, $1.5 million to the New York State Theater Institute. State parks, there's an interesting one. Dozens of state parks would be closed under this budget proposal, including 10 to 12 state parks in our region alone, with, I think, a $20 million cut to parks. Roads and bridges are doing a little better. They're getting a slight increase, $10 million, to the dedicated Highway and Bridge Trust Fund, taking it to $500 million. Of course, we know from reports that have been out there, Comptroller recently put out a report talking about the poor state of our roads and bridges. So, that gets to be an issue of health and safety. CHIPS funding that's so important to our county health departments, county highway departments, is flat at $363 million, no cut there. Marchicelli money also flat, not taking a cut at $39.7 million. It's probably hard to believe for someone that's out of a job and has been out of a job for a while, but as bad as things are in New York, we're actually in much better shape than many other states are in, believe it or not. Our unemployment rate is lower than many states, and in some ways we're in a better position to recover. But it's little comfort to people who are without jobs. But I think there is some hope going forward if we resist doing counterproductive things now as we deal with this budget. We should be doing income tax reform this year, serious income tax reform, doing a permanent, partial permanent reversal of now we're up to $22 billion a year in tax cutting that was done through the late 80s and 90s, about 50% of which went to the top 1 or 2% of New Yorkers. So it's time to do some serious reform there. Last year, we did some, seeing the recession ahead. We added 1 point for people who make $300,000 a year. We added one more bracket, 1 more percentage rate on people who make $500,000 a year. in New York. But we didn't do anything extra for people who make $1 million a year, $1.5 million a year, $2 million a year, $2.5 million, $3 million. You know, we have some very, very wealthy people in our state. I think that the wealthy elite of our country, I'm going to do my populist tone here that I believe in, you know, that the wealthy elite of our country who argued for the policies of deregulation for many years, who won that battle over deregulation, including the deregulation of Wall Street, famously, and benefited from that deregulation, making, we all can see, again, already, so quickly, obscene salaries and bonuses. I think it's only right to tax those people who argued for the policies, benefited from them, abused them, and now I feel that we ought to be taxing them to help clean up the mess that has been left behind from this catastrophe. So I'll just put my position right out there. I think most of you probably already know it. Another really important thing that the governor has done is another major thing is that he's totally restructuring SUNY and CUNY, what is, to my mind, a privatization of our state university and our city university systems. He is saying that the SUNY and CUNY boards would be free to set tuition at any amount they want, and varying from campus to campus and program to program across SUNY and CUNY. They would not have any oversight by the legislature, which has traditionally had major oversight since its founding in the 50s over SUNY and CUNY. He would also take out of the equation the Attorney General and the Comptroller in looking at all kinds of issues like leasing of land or public-private partnerships that SUNY or CUNY engage in, and just take them out of the equation and basically leave the SUNY Board of Trustees and the CUNY Board of Trustees to have a pretty free reign with all of those campuses. As someone who feels pretty strongly about SUNY, a SUNY brat that I am, having gotten both my BA and my master's at SUNY Geneseo, I feel pretty strongly about this one. I'm sure many of you do as well, that this proposal is the privatization of our state university. And we can talk about that more. Under the proposal, they would have a cap on what they could do. The SUNY board, for instance, could raise tuition up to 250%, 2.5 times what's called the HEPI, the Higher Ed Price Index, which is an index for higher ed, for housing, for books, and so on, the expenses of colleges and going to college. And that would mean this year that they could raise the tuition as much as 9.5% at SUNY, a $475 increase this year. To recoup the governor's also cut SUNY, as I said, $321, that's both campuses. But SUNY, for instance, to deal with the cut to SUNY, SUNY board would need to raise tuition by 12.5% this year alone, $621. A 2-year increase under this formula would be a 30% increase for SUNY students in their tuition, a 25% increase for CUNY. As there are proposals for tuition to go up in this way, TAP has been cut. The tuition assistance program that many students at SUNY and CUNY get has been cut by $52.7 million. And it would be the first time if this TAP cut happened. Of course, TAP is something we always kind of go crazy about and fight very, very hard over, as we do so many things. But it is sort of one of the core things for the Assembly. But it would be the first time if this stays, it would be the first time that tuition is higher than the maximum TAP award. So that a poor student, it would really create barriers for poor students going to college. Community colleges, including, of course, our own TC3, would experience a cut of $285 per FTE, per full-time equivalent student. It's a total cut to community colleges of $437 million statewide. I'm sorry, that's just for SUNY community colleges. And that is significantly below current law. Current law says that it's a shared expense, community colleges. The county picks up a third, the student and their families pick up a third, and the state picks up a third. But the state has not been meeting their obligation on that for some time. Governor has left alone the opportunity programs. They stay flat, not increased funding, but flat funding to EOP, HEOP, SEEKS, STEP, C-STEP, and the Liberty Partnership Program, which is a good thing. However, he has cut in this budget $3.4 million for child care programs at SUNY and CUNY. SUNY Cortland, for instance, has a wonderful child care program on its campus, and that's a major cut. And again, we'll put up barriers for poor families, single mothers, and others going back to college to get a degree. There's a bunch of stuff on workforce reductions. We're talking about cutting the state workforce by 3,500 jobs. He talks about $250 million in workforce actions. That could be no pay increase, a furlough, a 5-day pay deferral. There are negotiations going on. It's not clear what's going to happen there. Bunch of stuff, other stuff there. Cities. Cities and counties are both taking hits in the state budget. Counties are taking about a $32 million hit, much of that in human services, TANF issues, Medicaid reimbursement, hits to savings, I guess they're calling them at county health departments. Cities are the AIM program, the aid to municipalities. Cities outside New York City are taking a $13.4 million cut. It's about, to the city of Ithaca, it's about a $140,000 cut, I believe. Not huge, but significant for small, struggling cities. They will have to figure out what to do with that. Transportation's been interesting. Again, we all know the state of our roads and bridges. Many roads and bridges and roads in bad and poor shape. And there was a 5-year, the DOT last year put out a 5-year capital plan. But they didn't put out a way to fund it. They didn't put out a funding proposal. And so the governor vetoed it. So this year he's put out a 2-year capital plan for roads and bridges. Not something that's normally done. It's normally a 5-year plan. And that's worth $7 billion. And the original 5-year plan was $25 billion in capital funding for roads and bridges, which is really what's needed, what the DOT is recommending, and many other entities are recommending. Our roads and bridges have been let go for way too long. So that's been an interesting, I don't quite understand what the benefit is to the governor of doing a 2-year plan instead of a 5-year plan, but there it is. Major changes on economic development. The governor is proposing merging the 2 main agencies that do economic development, the Empire State Development Corporation and the Department of Economic Development, into one. Very importantly for us, the Empire Zone program is being sunsetted in this year, June of 2010. He's proposing, and we have an Empire Zone here. Of course, most counties do have an Empire Zone. I think the zone here has been really working quite well, but in many parts of the state, it has not worked well. There have been a lot of abuses over time, and it's simply not creating the jobs. That was the impetus for the program, to create jobs. So the governor's proposing what he's calling the Excelsior Jobs Program, spending $250 million annually over 5 years. That would, instead of doing a geographic support of business, would do an industry-based support, an industry-specific